And again, when you now look at the population and you understand why the population is as small as it is 32 years after independence, given the genocide that happened, that the Germans perpetrated on some of the clans in Namibia, you can understand how much of a holdover it is. And when we talk about inequality, we can see how much of apartheid continues to affect South Africa. So we can't ignore, exactly, so we can't ignore how history, how colonialism, how that genocide has left a transgenerational trauma and scar on Namibia as well, just as Joyce talked about.
I mean, a country with its enormous resources, tourism potential, should be comparable with Switzerland or Singapore, but because they have to deal with all of this, and this is what a lot of people miss out in the conversations we have, and that's the danger of a single story.
All right, so we're going to take a quick timeout now. You are watching News Central. This is a special broadcast commemorating Namibia at 32. The conversation from here now moves into issues around security, the economy, and tourism. And that will be coming up shortly after this. But this is News Central. Stay with us. You are welcome back to this special commemorative broadcast for Namibia at 32, happening right here on News Central. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun.
And I'm Gbenga Aborowa. We're still here celebrating Namibia at 32, and it's time for us to move into the second half of the show, where we'll be focusing on economic security and tourism. We have joining us live from Namibia in Hengari. She's a member of the Constituent Assembly in Namibia, and we also have Klaus Schade, an economist. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining us on this special Independence broadcast.
Good day, and thanks for having us, and good day also to all our viewers.
All right, I think we'll start with a special package we put together on the economic growth or the economy behind Namibia. Use that to lay a foundation for the conversation, and then we'll kick things off. So let's go straight to that, and then the questions and the conversation will continue.
Located on the west coast of southern Africa, Namibia's population is estimated at 2.6 million, according to 2018 statistics. It is a higher middle-income country with an estimated annual gross domestic product of $11 million and per capita of $5,828. In September 1993, Namibia introduced its own currency, the Namibian Dollar. In the same year, Namibia became a member of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Namibia is the fourth largest exporter of non-fuel minerals in Africa, the world's fourth largest producer of uranium, capable of producing 10% of the world mining output. The mining industry in Namibia was estimated to be around $1.79 billion in 2018.
We are compelled by the situation to make sure that we have to develop our copper, our gold, our uranium, our diamonds, our manganese, and those who will be doing agriculture. We need to even need to import more people at a later stage.
After experiencing average annual growth of 4.4% between 1991 and 2015, Namibia's economy stagnated in 2016 and fell into recession in the following year. Interestingly, in the form of reprieve, arable land accounts for only 1% of Namibia. Nearly half of the population is employed in agriculture.
On a national level, we found that there was about 40 billion Namibian dollars that could be gained. And on a regional level, we found that there was about 5 billion Namibian dollars in the Ochos-on-Jupa region.
The country's earnings are also generated from commodities like diamonds, livestock and fish. Its heavy dependence on the extraction and processing of minerals for export, including taxes and royalties from mining, account for 25% of its revenue. It is now ranked 95th freest in the 2022 index and 11th among 47 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa region. One of the fastest growing areas of economic development in Namibia is the growth of wildlife and tourism. Tourism majorly contributes 14.5% to the country's GDP, with job creation of about 18.2%. In 2020, it was estimated that tourism would bring in 26 million Namibian dollars. That was dented by the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, the Bank of Namibia maintained an accommodative policy to support a revival of the domestic economy.
We are regulating that sector in a smart way that commercially it makes sense, it's innovative, it's best practice. That's what we do in terms of modernizing the financial system.
In January 2021, President Hage Geingob formed the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board as an autonomous entity in the Namibian presidency and was established to reform the country's economic sector.
We instituted some of the deepest fiscal cuts since independence to rescue the economy and put it on a sustainable long-term growth trajectory.
The economy is now projected to grow by 3.3% in 2022, with an improvement in the regional and global economic environment. Lekon Onobanjo, reporting for News Central.
And that was a bit of a look at an economic foundation or background to this conversation we'll be having now that focuses on the economy, security, and tourism. And I just want to add that economic growth rates were 0% for 2016, minus 1% for 2017, finally moved into the 1.1% in 2018, minus 0.6% in 2019, minus 8% for 2020, of course, you know, the COVID years as well. And the average per capita income plummeted by 2021 to 2013 levels. Namibia was diagnosed as an economy on life support. So I think we should start this conversation from there. There were a number of years that were called the fat years for Namibia. And those years were really before the worst droughts that Namibia had in 2015 and 2016, which brought about the recession. So, Ina, let me start with you. The economic situation for many Namibians as the country celebrates 32 years of independence is very, very dire. A number of Namibians are in multi-dimensional poverty, according to the World Bank, and the economic crisis, unfortunately, with, of course, COVID-19, has worsened. What is happening? What is the government stance? What is the plan Namibia has for their 2.6 million population to address these issues?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and good afternoon to you and the viewers. I think I wouldn't want to place myself in a position where I speak on behalf of government, especially as I'm a member of parliament from an opposition party. But I do believe the Minister of Finance has mentioned a number of things that they intend to do to reform the economy and to ensure that there's some sort of growth that translates then into the development and the welfare of Namibians generally. And one of those measures that they've really taken upon some of the austerity measures and fiscal policy measures that they've put in place to ensure at least that we are reviving the economy. Whether that will succeed in terms of really recovering the economy and moving from a place where we are said the economy was on life support and into a new level, into a new era where the economy can support and can be sustainable in a way that it actually supports Namibians in general and also improves the welfare of Namibians. I think that would have to leave that to time, or time will tell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Hengari. Now I'd like to bring in Klaus here. Namibia is celebrating 32 years today. They're one of the few African countries that didn't have post-colonial civil strife and war. It's been relatively very peaceful. It's a country that is mineral rich and resource rich and has a thriving tourism industry. Just 2.6 million people, a country that is comparable to Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman. But quite a huge number of Namibians live below the poverty line. What is responsible for this?
Okay, thank you very much. As you correctly said, I mean, the mining sector is still the backbone, or has been the backbone of the Namibian economy, but it's a capital-intensive industry. It doesn't generate the jobs that are needed to employ more people, to provide a decent income and job security for the majority of people. We still have quite a large number of Namibians employed in the agricultural, in particular the subsistence agricultural sector that produces what they consume. And the productivity, the yields are relatively low, so therefore these are the areas where poverty is rampant. And we need, for instance, to increase the productivity in the agricultural sector to move people out of poverty. I strongly believe that there are opportunities in the agricultural sector. We have seen the emergence of, for instance, the grape industry in the south of the country. We are exporting now more than 20,000 tons of grapes between November and January, which is a very labor-intensive sector. We have seen investments in asparagus recently, and also blueberries recently, that are grown under irrigation in the north of the country. These two, I would say, rather small projects employ more than 1,000 people, up to 1,300, 1,400 people, especially during harvest times. And there are more opportunities. We have quite a number of government-owned green schemes in the north that haven't performed well, that are now probably being sourced out to the private sector. And they certainly have a potential to create a number of jobs. And these are jobs in communities where you hardly have any other cash income, so it can stimulate other economic activities. The income will circulate in these areas, and that certainly can have an impact on poverty. So it's important that we continue to focus also on the agricultural sector. What has helped certainly to reduce poverty over the years is the social safety net that the government expanded substantially. For instance, we do have grants for orphans and other vulnerable children. About 4,000 of them benefited from these grants some 20 years ago. Now it's more than 400,000 children who benefit from the grants. Although the monthly amount hasn't really increased, it actually in real terms is only value half of what it has been in 2000. But still, the expansion has now benefited 100 times of children, and also with pension funds and others, other social safety measures, they have certainly contributed. Of course, we need to do more. We need to invest more into quality education, quality health services. There are still too many health or education facilities, particularly in the northeastern parts of the country, that are rather provisional, rudimentary, and you cannot expect a quality educational outcome under these circumstances. So while we have invested a lot into the economic infrastructure over the past decades, like transport infrastructure, road, or the expansion of the Walvis Bay Harbor, and other infrastructure, we need to focus more to improve the educational and health facilities to, let's say, contribute to a well-educated and healthy population that then can take up also economic opportunities that are still, there are a lot of economic activities in the country, I believe. And we need the educated and healthy population to make use of these opportunities.
All right, so I want to bring Honorable Hengari back in here, and we're looking at issues around the economy, and that can only happen when everyone is part of. So the theme for the 32nd Independence Anniversary is prosperity for all, a people united for prosperity. There we go. And when you hear a people united for prosperity, you're thinking about everybody being able to be part of the prosperity, everybody being brought to the table. But in the previous hour, we had a conversation that really brought up the issues around structural exclusion of young people and the structural exclusion of people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum from being able to enjoy, quote unquote, I said, maybe the benefits of democracy. And when you look at it, there have been a number of more Namibians who have crossed into the poverty line in recent times. So when it comes to being able to include everyone, every Namibian, bringing them to the table, having them contribute to the economy, and also having them benefit, what really needs to be done? Because we see that the formal economy continues to remain dependent on government investment, but we've seen a number of scandals that let you know that it's only a very few number of people who are benefiting from some of the resources that Namibia has.
Well, thank you very much. I think government needs to be very deliberate in its efforts to include the citizens generally, whether it is in wealth, in development, and so forth. But most importantly, I don't think you can grow an economy without building industries. It's important that you build industries. And you find that a lot of young people, especially in Namibia, are very involved in businesses. Young people are entrepreneurs and are looking to take up opportunities in the business sector, get involved in industries and so forth. So I think there needs to be deliberate effort, not just politically, but I think there needs to be laws that are explicit in stating how much young people should benefit, for example, from government procurement processes. I see in other countries where 30% or 40% is set aside for youth-run enterprises or for youth-run businesses. So there needs to be laws, there needs to be deliberate effort, not only involving young people, but also building industries to ensure that when we're building this economy, it's actually dependent on industries. And that way, I think people would have then the chance to share the wealth of the country. I also think we need to improve in terms of access to information. You find, looking at the statistics now, I know last year, youth unemployment was at a staggering 50.3% alone. And if you look at the young people in rural areas, youth unemployment in rural areas stands at 52%. And that means that access to information, access to opportunities is something that I think government should invest in to ensure that it's not just the urban youth or the urban citizens that have opportunities, but those that want to go into farming, into agriculture, even in rural areas, have some sort of access to opportunities so that they can share in the wealth of the country.
And I'll follow up with Claus on this, because many people don't often make the connection between excluding large segments of the society and a lack of economic growth. So is there a connection for Namibia in this? While we know the recession in 2016 was brought about by the drought, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic did not help the recovery, we're seeing a 3.3 projection growth rate for 2022. But if you continue to keep large segments of your society out of the conversation, that growth is really not going to be as much as you imagine. So what has this lack of inclusion and this structural exclusion to some people, what has it cost Namibia?
Okay,
Klaus?
thank you very
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I believe there's a growth rate for 2022 of 3.3% is probably a bit optimistic, especially given now the global background, the uncertainties about global recovery, increasing oil prices, etc., etc. So therefore, we might end up with a lower growth rate. But for me, the economic growth rate is not so decisive. It really matters in which sector does growth happen. For instance, we have just inaugurated or launched the largest diamond mining vessel that came with a price tag of about 7 billion Namibian dollar, roughly, or almost 500 million US dollar. That could contribute significantly to economic growth. But it creates only about 160 direct jobs. While if you invest, for instance, in agriculture or so, you can create hundreds or even thousands of jobs. So therefore, it's not about economic growth, but creating employment. And I believe what government needs to do is, with all the investment into infrastructure, and so it's not just about building additional roads or improving access to information and communication technology, or another dam that we built in the south of the country that could be used for irrigation. But how can we use these investment into strengthening or diversifying our economic development at large? So how can we ensure that more Namibian companies are involved in these projects and increase the supply capacity of Namibian companies and the technical knowledge, the know-how, and so on and so forth. So we need to have a more holistic approach, not just to, let's say, embark on a certain project, but see this project as part of developing the whole economy. And I think this is important since we are talking about, since a couple of months, about the green hydrogen, the potential to produce green hydrogen in Namibia, or even the potential discovery of a major oil fields offshore Namibia. We need to bring these projects and opportunities into developing business capacities in Namibia, that we can have the potential to supply to these opportunities, and thereby creating jobs in the manufacturing and the services sectors, but then also attract so-called downstream industries. For instance, green hydrogen, not just to produce green hydrogen, but attract investment into, let's say, producing other than green products, so products with a high energy content that are currently produced perhaps with coal, with oil, with brown or black energy, and thereby creating additional employment in downstream industry. So I think if we take this approach of trying to involve as many industries or businesses into these projects, we can increase job opportunities, job creation in the country. But what often is mentioned as one of the major obstacles is access to finance. Although we have a quite broad variety of financial instruments from commercial banks, but also the development finance institutions in Namibia. We do have the Development Bank of Namibia, the Agricultural Bank of Namibia, and so on. But still, despite all these programs and institutions, the access to and the cost of finance is seen as a major challenge for businesses in general and also for the youth. And it's also understandable because financial institutions require, if not collaterals, but they want to have security that the loans are being repaid. And young people without a proper track record, it's of course challenging for them to provide these securities. So therefore, we would need to find different ways of providing them with access to finance, reduce the requirements, and of course, we need to take risks. In other parts of the world as well, startups, only maybe 30–40% of startups survive the first 1 to 2 years. But this is not really a failure. We learn from experiences and then can do better the next time when we again come up with a new idea. So therefore, also these access to financial services and so need to be reviewed and it needs to be made more accessible to, in particular, also young people. But there are many other areas as well. I think what is important is also to create kind of mentorship programs by established businesses to help the youth and startup in general in the process of setting up businesses, creating networks, identifying markets, and so on, so that they are successful.
Thank you, Klaus. I would like to bring in Honorable Hengari here. The Harambee Prosperity Plan was launched by President Gbenga, the second one that covers the period from 2021 to 2025. It's targeted policy programs in order to enhance service delivery, contribute to economic recovery, and engender inclusive growth. How did the Harambee Prosperity Plan 1, how did it fare? And is this silver bullet, is this the economic blueprint that would lead Namibia to continuous growth and prosperity?
Well, I think the Harambee Prosperity Plan contains a number of ideas that, if implemented and correctly implemented with the right resources, and if the relevant ministries and agencies, including the private sector, they came to the table to ensure that the implementation of these ideas, I do think there would be some sort of change in the economy, some sort of growth in the economy that would then translate into the development or just really creating an enabling environment in which not only young Namibians or the ordinary Namibians can thrive in, but also Namibians who want to take up businesses, Namibians who want to do entrepreneurship. And it would also result then in job creation if implemented. And I think one of the challenges as we reflect today on Independence Day, as we celebrate Independence Day, I think it gives us an opportunity to also reflect. And I think one of the things that one of the biggest challenges in our country is that we have a leadership crisis. And that leadership crisis is also unfortunately linked to a lack of implementation. We have a number of good policies in our country that, if implemented, would also turn around the lives of Namibians and generally ordinary Namibians. But we have an implementation problem where we have good plans. We have plans to transform the economy, to diversify the economy, to create industries. But what happens is, I think there's a lack of political will really to implement. And I think for as long as we do not have a change in attitude and how we look at some of these policies, I don't see us growing or doing any better than we are now. So I think The leadership crisis, yeah, again, going back to the leadership crisis, I think we have leaders who do not understand also and do not read some of the policies, and therefore there is a lack of implementation of these policies. But I do think the Harambee Prosperity Plan contains a number of ideas that need implementation, but there's a need for political will and there's a need for implementation.
All right, Ina, thank you so much for that. And we want to continue the conversation as we look at tourism in particular, but we do have a special package. Namibia is known as one of the most beautiful countries here on the continent, and that beauty can be turned into revenue if the tourism sector is, of course, given its due place. So let's look at this and we'll continue the conversation.
Significant cheetah population. Namibia is distinguished by the Namibia Desert along its Atlantic Ocean coast. Known to be the 5th best tourist destination in the world in terms of value, the country is among the prime destinations in Africa known for ecotourism. Besides being home to the world's biggest sand dunes, canyons, mountains, rivers and extensive wildlife, the South African country gets an average of 1 million visitors every year. With a population of over 2.5 million people, the country is one of the cleanest in Africa with massive infrastructural development. Tourism in Namibia remains a major industry as it helps boost the country's economy, contributing over $7 billion to its gross domestic product. In 2008, about 77,000 jobs directly or indirectly depended on Namibia's tourism, amounting to 18.2% of all formal jobs in the country. The Ministry of Tourism in Namibia, however, emphasized the need to consolidate unity and inclusivity in the tourism sector and to develop tourism at community in regions in order to ensure that the sector continues to flourish.
It is important to note that at this juncture, therefore, the public and the private sector, the key stakeholder, creative industries must work together with the ministry to support the recovery initiatives.
When I say tourism to the people, it's more than just a wall with stands. It's more than just having an event like today. It's more than just 2 or 3 days. It has to be an active campaign in that period, and our focus will be on that region, promoting that region.
However, the COVID-19 pandemic devastated Namibia's tourism industry following closure of borders and the subsequent cancellation of both regional and international flights. This in turn hampered years of economic gains recorded by the sector. The industry lost about $220 million from travel-related service as a result of the pandemic. Windhoek, the country's capital and biggest city, is home to the country's finest hotels and Windhoek Hosier Kutako International Airport. Namibia's harsh climate and arid conditions make the country a top spot for different extreme sport events like desert runs and ultra triathlons. In recent years, with the emergence of new development, Namibia has seen new tourism sites such as spas and medical tourism, which are emerging into Namibia's tourist scene and growing very fast, turning the country into Africa's Dubai. Omolola Ololade reported for News Central.
Quite a very beautiful country indeed. So much to see and lots of potential, but it's sad to see that COVID-19, the great disruptor, also had some adverse effects on the tourism industry in Namibia. Now, I'd like to come to Klaus. We've seen the potential. We've seen what Namibia can do in terms of its offerings for tourism. What does the government need to do to make it a more appealing destination? What are they not doing right?
I think it's important to ease doing business in the country. And there are still some red tape that hinders faster development and investment in the country. So we need to make use of ICT, information and communication technologies, online submissions and approvals of applications for whatever is required when it comes to investments in the country, or opening new businesses, and so on and so forth. It's still taking quite a number of not just days or weeks, but 1-2 months, or even longer to set up businesses here and get all the licenses. I think if we can improve there, we improve the attractiveness of doing business in the country. There is still, of course, some policy uncertainties. We are discussing the new equitable economic empowerment framework that should benefit previously disadvantaged Namibians since quite a number of years, as well as the Namibia investment promotion and facilitation bill that is on the agenda since at least 6-7 years. It was promulgated and then withdrawn after concerns were raised. So these are important policies, legal frameworks for the private sector that need to be resolved in one way or the other, to so that potential investors, foreign but also Namibian investors, know exactly what to expect, what is the framework, and then make proper investment decisions. And we have made progress. We have, since you referred to tourism, for instance, since 2-3 years, it's possible to get the visa on arrival in Namibia, which I think is a major step ahead to attract tourists from countries where we don't have a representation, where we don't have a high commission or an embassy, and for which or whom it would be quite challenging to get visa. So visa on arrival, and also for business people, they have a multi-year, multi-entry visas now, and so on. So there are improvements, but we need to address other areas as well. We are still lagging a bit behind.
All right, Honorable Hengari, I want to bring you in because even with tourism, that means you need workers. You need people who are going to work in these sectors. And there's been what seems to be some kind of disconnect between education and employment, or that pipeline for many Namibians. Now, the United Nations FPA country representative described Namibia like this. He said Namibia, with one of the youngest populations in Africa, could reach a staggering 50.30% youth unemployment rate by the end of 2021. We're still waiting for the numbers to come in. Failure to provide education, create decent opportunities and access to health services for a youth-dominated population poses a potential threat to the economic and social stability of the country. Now, Namibia is peaceful. I won't even need to put relatively before. It's a stable, peaceful country. So security is not so much of an issue now, but we've seen with economies and countries that have large youth populations with nothing for them to do, with not a lot of education, employment pipelines, we've seen the restiveness grow. We've seen the instability grow. We've seen the crime levels go up until they become national issues. So even while there is security and calm now, is Namibia really looking at the fact that a lot of young people are unemployed, have never held formal jobs, are having educational issues that could eventually lead to some kind of instability in the wider society?
Well, I think you're right. There is a disconnect between our education system and the employment market, or the job market. You find that young people go to school, young people go through vocational training. However, they exit these institutions without the necessary skill that would then allow them to be employable and ready for the job market. And one of the things that we've done is that we've brought a motion to Parliament to say, look, let's declare youth unemployment in our country as a crisis, as a national emergency, so that during that time, the state and government, allocate the best resources, the best persons to really come up with some sort of way forward to ensure that whatever we do from now on, each and every single ministry, government agency, and even the private sector come together and are working in unison to address the unemployment crisis. So that motion is still on the floor now in Parliament. So we're looking at a number of solutions to the youth unemployment crisis. And I think one of the things that perhaps we can do as a government and as leaders in public service is that I think young people from the onset, from the institutions of learning, there should be some sort of foundation that is laid for them to get them ready for the job market. And even after they graduate, I think there needs to be some sort of cohesion. There should be a link between young people and the job market. And that is where you come up with ideas of mentorship programs, internship programs. And we are very deliberate when we talk about internship programs. And we say yes to internship programs, but those must also be regulated, because I think jobs are about dignifying and ensuring that each and every Namibian lives a dignified life. So having an internship that overworks you and underpays you, I don't think that is the kind of thing we want in our country. We want to ensure that in as much as we are getting these young people ready for the job market, their dignity is protected, and we promote the idea of really having them prepared and having that link and having those mentorship programs to ensure that young people are at least ready for the job market. I think Klaus spoke about something on internship programs, not internship programs, sorry. He spoke about mentorship programs. And I think that also goes back to if we want young people to get into businesses and SMEs, what platforms are we creating to ensure that the upcoming gain some sort of experience and knowledge for those that are already in the business sector? And I think access to finance actually becomes a very crucial conversation and topic here, because just last month we had a meeting with the Development Bank of Namibia, and we found that they have a number of packages for young entrepreneurs, yet one of the biggest blocks in the way of these young entrepreneurs is that they have to provide some sort of collateral to get access to this funding. So then I think that conversation, access to finance, how do we design a finance package and then expect young people to have collateral, young people who are coming from university, young people who are coming from vocational training centers. So it's really about creating a conducive environment where young people are able to thrive, not only as entrepreneurs, but as active contributors to the economy.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And just before we quickly wrap up, in less than a minute, Klaus, what are your projections for the Namibian economy as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, and having seen the implementation of the first phase of President Gbenga's Harambee Prosperity Plan? In less than a minute, please.
I think there are very good opportunities. As I highlighted already, in agriculture, for instance, there are opportunities to go beyond crops like maize, millet, and others to produce high-value crops under irrigation. We have opportunities in harnessing our other natural resources, sun, wind, biomass, to produce electricity and become even an electricity exporter instead of net importer. There are opportunities in the logistics area to use the expansion of the Walvis Bay Harbor to be the port on the at least southern Western African coast to then facilitate trade with landlocked countries such as Zambia, even DRC, further to Malawi, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and so on and so forth. We see an increase in trade there. We need to ensure that the infrastructure is available to have a seamless trade across borders. In the mining industries, we have lithium, we have other rare earth minerals, and so on, that we can use for the new technologies, including e-mobility, batteries, and so on and so forth.
All right, Klaus.
So I believe if we can move as fast as we have done over the past 1.5 years with the green hydrogen project, also with some of these other projects, we should achieve higher growth rates, and higher growth rates are necessary to improve the standard of living, because per capita income has dropped over the past 6-7 years.
Okay. Klaus, we'll have to leave it. I apologize. We'll have to leave it at that because of time. No problem, because I would like to get Honorable Hengari an opportunity in 1 minute as well to wrap up her thoughts. And very quickly, I'll leave you with this to use. The Bertelsmann Transformation Index for 2022 classified Namibia as a defective democracy with limited economic transformation and a moderate governance index, and that the government faces the mammoth task of regaining the trust and confidence of the public. What does Namibia's government need to do to move the country and the economy forward? In 1 minute, please, Honorable.
I think in 1 minute, one must realize that there is an interconnection between the decisions that we take as policymakers and as lawmakers and as government, and there's an intricate relationship between those decisions that we make and the livelihoods of our people in the country and how well they're doing. So I think government must be intentional and deliberate in introducing programs, initiatives, even policies that ensure our people benefit from the resources. Our people benefit from the fish of the sea, from the minerals of the soil. I think there needs to be deliberate effort. And I think to close off, really, I want to read a quote by Kwame Ture. In one of his books, he says, "Those who would assume the responsibility of representing the people in this country must be able to throw off the notion that they can effectively do so and still maintain a maximum amount of security. Jobs will have to be sacrificed, positions of prestige and status given up, favors forfeited. It may well be that leadership and security are basically incompatible." Thank you.
Thank you very much to our guests. Thank you so much, Ina Hengari, a member of the Constituent Assembly for Namibia, as well as Klaus Shade, economist, as well, for joining us on this part of the conversation that looks at the economy, security, and tourism as Namibia clocks 32 years of independence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. And we know that we have news in a couple of minutes, so we'll be wrapping things up on this end. Namibia is 32 years old today, celebrating independence, one of the last African countries to, of course, get that independence, but it comes with a lot of baggage.
And, wow, this is where we draw the curtains on today's special broadcast celebrating Namibia at 32. Thank you all for being a part of the broadcast. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And thank you so much.